You know, sometimes I'm amazed at how certain truths of the faith pass right in front of our eyes and almost no one notices. When I started digging into what it truly means to be one of Jesus' chosen, I stumbled upon something very few people ever talk about. There's a huge contrast between God's free calling and the quiet cost that falls on anyone who decides to walk the narrow path. It's like comparing the price of getting a cheap driver's license in the US versus paying a small fortune in another country. The goal is the same, but the cost changes dramatically. And once I realized that this same principle applies to our spiritual life, everything clicked. Because deep down, being chosen was never about ease. It has always been about depth. And this is exactly where things get even more intriguing. While many people assume that being chosen should mean fewer problems, the Bible paints the opposite picture. The closer you get to Jesus, the clearer the trials, the sacrifices, and that kind of suffering that shapes real faith. It's as if God opens a free door, but makes it clear that stepping through it requires courage, surrender, and a trust that runs deeper than words. And if you've never heard this laid out with this level of clarity, stay with me. Because from here on out, you're going to understand why so few are willing to pay this price and why this topic stirs something deep in everyone who truly wants to follow Jesus all the way to the end. In the days of Jesus, Israel lived under the heavy rule of the Roman Empire. Daily life was marked by injustice, high taxes, religious corruption, and a constant sense of spiritual oppression. People longed for a deliverer, but they were torn between ancient traditions, political expectations, and the disappointments of everyday life. In this tense environment, Jesus walked among the poor, the wealthy, the sick, the religious elite, and ordinary people, all desperate for hope, yet many unable to see the true kingdom he was announcing. And in that setting, his words carried far deeper meaning than just a beautiful phrase. Jesus used parables because they created a bridge between the harsh reality people lived in and the spiritual truths of God's kingdom. For many, hearing about God felt distant, but hearing about seeds, fishermen, wedding feasts, and vineyards made everything relatable. He used simple stories to reveal eternal mysteries and at the same time to expose who truly wanted to listen. Parables filtered hearts. Those who sought truth understood them. Those who wanted curiosity or quick benefits walked away confused. In this way, Jesus taught and tested people's inner disposition without waving political flags or provoking Rome directly. And within that intentional method comes the statement, "Many are called, but few are chosen." For a people accustomed to rituals, traditions, and religious appearances, this sounded deeply confronting. Jesus was saying that God calls everyone into his kingdom, but not everyone responds with depth, surrender, and transformation. Most admire the invitation, but few embrace the cost. Before we understand this spiritual weight, the cost no one wants to pay, we need to see the heart of this context. Jesus spoke to people who were tired, confused, and hungry for meaning, and his parables were the key to revealing who was truly willing to follow him for real. When I talk to you about this free calling, a lot of people think responding to God is as simple as accepting an invitation. But the truth is, being one of the chosen involves a journey of faith that changes everything. How you wake up, how you face your day, and how you deal with what life throws at you. Grace opens the door, but it's obedience that teaches you how to walk through it. And you know this, walking with Jesus was never about ease, but about real transformation. Maybe you've already noticed how following Christ shakes your routine, because he keeps asking for small sacrifices that seem minor at first, but actually shape your discipleship. It's like when someone decides to cut sugar. It sounds simple, until they realize it's hidden in everything. With God, it's the same way. He starts touching areas you thought were off limits. Then you begin to understand why so many people quit before discovering the purpose behind it all. That's why I always say the calling is free, but staying among the chosen comes with a cost. And it's not just financial or emotional. It's a spiritual cost marked by the cross, by by daily perseverance and by the courage to keep going even when the trials hit hard. Jesus said it plainly, "Whoever wants to follow me must deny themselves and take up their cross." And maybe you've wondered why the narrow path feels so tight sometimes, why the weight of your choices presses so heavily on your chest. The truth is, anyone who chooses to walk the narrow path is already being prepared for something bigger, even if they can't see it yet. And it's right here that many begin to ask why the chosen suffer so much. Sometimes I know you look at your own path and wonder why the trials seem so constant, even though you have faith and carry this calling inside you. But let me remind you of something. The chosen don't suffer because God forgot them. They suffer because He's shaping a kind of strength that never grows in easy seasons. When the pain presses in, it isn't rejection, it's refinement. And it's in that pressure that many discover walking the narrow path was never about comfort, but about purpose. I've seen people who love Jesus ask, why do the chosen suffer so much? The answer isn't found in feelings, but in Scripture itself. James says, the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And that's not poetry, that's real life. You know those days when everything feels heavy? That weight isn't there to crush you, but to strengthen parts of you that calm days would never touch. The chosen learn that contrary winds reveal what still needs to be anchored. Think, for example, of someone who loses a job, yet stays obedient, trusting, even when logic says the opposite. That person isn't being punished, they're being prepared. Suffering, when lived in obedience, reshapes the soul, deepens faith, and creates roots strong enough to withstand any storm. God never wastes a single tear from someone walking in sincere discipleship. He's working behind the scenes, even when you think you're standing alone. And it's interesting how the greater the calling, the stronger the hits seem to be. It's as if God is whispering, I'm raising you for something beyond the ordinary. Paul lived that reality firsthand, and there's something in his story that will help you see suffering through a different lens. But before we get there, we need to talk about a sign that marks every chosen one, the cross as the seal of this calling. You know, when I think about the cross, I realize it isn't a burden thrown onto someone who was chosen. It's almost like God's signature written over their journey. The cross has always followed true disciples because it shows that the calling isn't just a beautiful idea, it's something living, shaping your faith day after day. And the more you understand this, the clearer it becomes. No one carries the cross unless they've first been set apart for a purpose. Just like Jesus said in Luke 9:23, take up your cross and follow me. And carrying this cross sometimes feels unfair. I get it. But it's exactly in those moments that your heart learns the difference between a comfortable life and a surrendered one. The cross shows that suffering is part of the narrow path, not because God rejected you, but because He marked you as someone who belongs to Him. People who don't understand the cost of discipleship often think it's strange when you refuse shortcuts. But you already know, shortcuts don't fit someone who's been chosen. The truth is, the cross reminds you every day that there is a cost behind following Jesus, and that cost isn't always visible to others. There are days when you have to choose what's right, even if it puts you against the current. Ever noticed how people who only live on spiritual appearances avoid any kind of trial? It's because the cross really does weigh, but it only weighs on those who truly carry it. And that's exactly what separates someone who merely heard the calling from someone who actually answered it. And as you walk with this cross, something unexpected happens. Your perseverance grows. You start realizing that heaven isn't just a destination, it becomes the motivation that keeps you steady on the narrow path. And of course, understanding this cross opens space for something most people never talk about, yet it completely defines the journey of someone truly chosen. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. You're about to see how this weight doesn't crush you, it strengthens you for what comes ahead. It's interesting how obedience sounds so simple when we first hear about it, yet becomes one of the deepest journeys of faith when lived out daily. Have you noticed how Jesus' calling never comes with shortcuts? It's like walking down a narrow road where every decision demands perseverance. Many times, obeying hurts more than any external trial because the real battle happens inside us, between our own will and God's will. And even so, it's in this tension that the chosen discover the true meaning of following the cross. There are moments when Jesus whispers direction into your heart and you know exactly what you need to do, but you hesitate. Maybe it's forgiving someone who deeply wounded you, maybe letting go of an opportunity that seems perfect, or maybe simply waiting when everything inside you wants to run. Obedience is never comfortable, never has been. Just remember Abraham climbing the mountain with Isaac, Genesis 22. But it's in that surrender that your relationship with God deepens, and you begin to understand, in practice, the real cost of following Jesus. And here's the fascinating part. The heavier obedience feels, the more it transforms you. Ever notice that? It's like God uses those moments to shape you in ways only He understands. You think you're losing something, but you're gaining spiritual strength, the kind that only grows when you choose to trust. That's why so many give up too soon, because obedience requires courage, real faith, and leaving the old life behind, like disciples who don't just believe, but live what they claim to believe. And as you keep walking, you start noticing that every step of obedience opens the door for the next one. It's as if heaven is carefully watching those small, quiet choices, and without even realizing it, you're stepping into a deeper level of discipleship, one where your heart matures and begins to see that obedience isn't a loss, but a path of covenant. And it's exactly at this point that a new question arises, leading us straight into the next subject. What happens when following Jesus starts costing things you never imagined you'd have to give up? Sometimes, following Jesus puts you face to face with losses that feel unfair, but they're part of walking that narrow path. I know it hurts when something important slips through your fingers, especially when you're trying to live by faith and stay faithful to His calling. But every time a door closes, God is shaping the chosen for something greater. And even when suffering shows up, He never abandons those who've chosen real obedience. I've noticed that, in real life, obedience comes with a price most people don't want to pay. Sometimes it means losing old friendships that can't keep up with your discipleship. Other times it means letting go of a plan that looked perfect on paper. But when you choose to carry the cross, instead of taking shortcuts, those losses turn into seeds for something God is preparing in heaven. And that's exactly where the true cost of following Jesus reveals its real value. Maybe that's exactly where you are right now. Doors that didn't open, people who walked away, dreams that shattered on the ground. But let me remind you of something simple. Being chosen isn't about escaping trials. It's about continuing to walk even when something precious gets lost on the way. And that's not just theory. It's the same process that shaped Abel, Noah, David, and so many others Scripture presents as examples of perseverance. Every loss carries a hidden purpose, even when you can't see it yet. And if it hurts today, it's because God is aligning you with something you're not ready to understand. Faith grows exactly in those empty spaces suffering leaves behind. And when we accept that process, we begin to see that these quiet losses are part of the shaping of the true chosen ones, which leads us to understand something very few people ever notice about the loneliness of true disciples. When I tell you that walking as one of the chosen involves seasons of loneliness, I'm not saying it to scare you, but to prepare you. Many times when you respond to God's calling, you realize that some people simply can't keep up with the pace of the faith growing inside you. And it's in that silence, emptier than you expected, that God begins revealing things only those on the narrow path can see. You've probably felt it before, surrounded by people, yet feeling like you're the only one wrestling with certain trials. That feeling isn't failure. It's a sign that true discipleship is shaping your soul. Even Jesus went through this. Remember Gethsemane? When not even his closest disciples could stay awake and pray with him for 1 hour. Matthew 26:40. Loneliness is sometimes the language of heaven. And do you know why? Because God uses that space to strengthen your obedience. Obedience that doesn't depend on applause or recognition. He hushes the noise so you can see what actually matters. Have you noticed how the pain of losing certain people often makes room for a deeper closeness with Christ? This is exactly where perseverance begins to take root. But hold on to this. That loneliness isn't abandonment. It's preparation. God sets apart to use and sets apart to transform. When he leads you through that narrow stretch, it's because he's training you to carry the cross in a way others can't yet. And hidden between the lines, this is the place where he starts guiding you into experiences that explain why so many of the chosen walk through such intense journeys, and it leads you straight into the next step of this path. When I look at Paul's story, I see a man who understood God's calling in a way most people today can't even imagine. He had everything to be admired by society, yet he discovered that the chosen walk a completely different path, the path of the cross. And the moment that truth hit him, his faith turned into practical obedience, even knowing suffering would come with it. You've probably noticed this too. Sometimes God completely flips our direction upside down. Paul went from persecutor to persecuted, and that didn't happen by accident. It was the real cost of discipleship, one that reshapes the heart and exposes what's true. He found out that following Jesus comes with a price that very few are willing to pay, just like you feel when you try walking that narrow path and everything suddenly seems harder. But that's exactly where perseverance starts to grow for real. And here's what's fascinating. As Paul became a threat to hell itself, his suffering increased, but so did the glory of God over his life. The same thing happens with every chosen believer. The greater the trial, the brighter heaven shines inside the heart. He was beaten, imprisoned, betrayed, yet he never walked away from the calling. Doesn't that sound a lot like parts of your own journey? The Bible paints this contrast clearly in Acts 9 when Jesus himself says that Paul must suffer for my name. It sounds heavy, doesn't it? But beneath those words lies a truth most people never grasp. Why the chosen suffer and why that suffering is part of the process. And once you begin to see that, your perspective shifts completely for what comes next. When you look back at the trials you've already faced, you might feel like none of it makes sense. But I want you to understand something. Every step on that narrow path is building in you a perseverance that heaven deeply values. The chosen never walk in vain. The faith you hold today is preparing the ground for what God has promised ahead. Sometimes the suffering gets so heavy that you wonder if it's worth continuing. I get it. Every disciple has faced that kind of soul weariness. But Scripture tells us that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Romans 8:18. That means nothing you're living right now will be wasted. God turns pain into purpose. Think of someone you know who kept going even when everything screamed for them to stop. It's striking how people like that carry an invisible strength, almost as if they were shaped by fire itself. And that's exactly what happens. When you remain firm even without answers, your faith becomes a seed that heaven waters with eternal promises. And this is where something deep starts to unfold. The more you walk, the more you realize this future glory isn't just a destination. It's a living hope that sustains every hard step. And that hope prepares your heart for something even greater, leading us into the next part of the journey of the chosen. Sometimes the pain you carry feels far too heavy, and I know you've wondered why God allows certain wounds. But on this narrow path, walked by the chosen, there are moments when faithfulness grows precisely when everything around you tries to knock you down. When you stay firm, even without understanding, your faith gains a depth only those who've walked through real trials can grasp. And it's interesting. Throughout Scripture, every time someone seemed to be at their breaking point, God was on the verge of revealing something greater. The truth is, pain never comes alone. It always carries hidden lessons. You might be facing something no one else sees, because the chosen know the real price of following Jesus. Faithfulness in this place is like gold refined in fire, and James 1:12 reminds us, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial." And when you hold on to God, even through tears, something inside you begins to mature in a way only heaven fully understands. Many people give up at the exact moment God is building their strength. You, however, have begun to realize that pain can teach far more than comfort ever will. It's in this dry, difficult ground that perseverance becomes real, where discipleship stops being theory and begins shaping your character. Faithfulness and suffering open spiritual doors that never open in peaceful seasons, and that's why the chosen often suffer while walking the narrow path. And when the pain tightens its grip, it's common to feel alone, as if heaven has gone silent. But don't be fooled. This silence isn't absence, it's preparation. God is working behind the scenes of your story, and this phase is positioning you for what's still ahead. Stay steady, because how you respond now directly impacts how His promise will shine even brighter. I need you to understand something simple but profound. When Jesus spoke about heaven, He didn't describe it as a reward for people who lived perfectly, but for those who remained faithful despite their trials. He made it clear that the chosen are the ones who keep walking the narrow road, even when their faith feels small. And this is where many stumble. Heaven isn't for those who never fell. It's for those who always got back up. When you think about your battles, maybe you've wondered if it's worth continuing. But Jesus said in John 14:2 that He's preparing a place for you. That means He already considered your tears, your suffering, your fight against discouragement, and still saw in you someone who wouldn't quit. Heaven isn't an empty promise. It's a home prepared for those who carried the cross with perseverance. You know that feeling when no one seems to notice your efforts? God notices. When you chose to obey, even when it cost you something, even when you faced rejection, even when following Jesus cost friendships and opportunities, all of it was recorded as part of your discipleship. And in a mysterious way, every bit of pain you endured became a brick in the construction of the eternity waiting for you. And here's the most fascinating part. Every time the Bible talks about this promise, it subtly leaves an invitation between the lines. Keep going. Don't stop now. Don't turn back. Because those who understand why the chosen suffer also understand the cost of following Jesus. And it's that very understanding that keeps their eyes fixed on eternity. And there's something even deeper about this prepared heaven that you may have never noticed. Want to go on? You know, as you listen to all of this, you might have already realized that every step, every choice, and every sacrifice you've made wasn't wasted. It's incredible how God uses exactly those parts of the journey, those nobody sees, to shape the kind of faith that holds you up, the perseverance that matures you, and that quiet assurance that heaven really is preparing something worth every tear and every cross you've had to carry. And hey, if this message spoke to you in any way, don't wait. Go ahead and hit the like button right now. It helps reach people who are fighting their own battles and who need to hear about this real calling too. And make sure you subscribe, because you know deep down you want to keep growing on this narrow path few understand, but that transforms everything. And as you think through everything we talked about trials, about the cost of following Jesus when everything feels heavy, about why the chosen suffer more than they ever expected, this might be the perfect moment to share this video with someone you know who's on the verge of giving up. Yes, share it without hesitation, because sometimes God uses something as simple as one click to reach someone right at their breaking point. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me which part spoke most to your heart. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs. And since you're already here, don't forget to watch the next video linked in the description and in the card. It will take you even deeper into this journey as you and I are walking together, and I'll see you in the next one.